Let's start with York United because they brought in a new manager this week, new head coach. And while I love to talk to just you about this, Niko, we have so many more people that we want to bring in. In fact, we have one on the line right now joining us, Thomas Hewitt, joining the show right now. And he is from the Canadian Soccer Daily and Walking the Red. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Of course, I'm really happy to be here and talk all things York national team, CPL. As you say, there's a lot to talk about, so yeah, it should be fun.
There really is, and why don't we just jump right into it? Because we already said it. York United announces their new manager, Benjamin Mora, former Atlas FC manager, becomes the third full time manager of the Nine Stripes following Jimmy Brennan and Martin Nash. He had his big press reveal this week. You were there. What is the vibe kind of around this signing for you, Thomas?
I think, a lot of people don't totally know what to expect from him right now. Obviously, he's managed for Atlas and Liga MX. That's a big club with some recent success. A few years back they won the Apertura and the Clausura in one season. But at the same time, his most successful managerial stint, his longest managerial stint, came in Malaysia, which is, not many people necessarily know enough about that league and the level of play there to really kind of compare what he did in Malaysia, which is four Malaysian Premier League titles in 7 seasons, I believe, with Johor, uh, to the CPL. And how is that all going to shape up with the CPL? We have seen that he won an Asian Champions League group, and pretty difficult one too. So that's definitely a positive. And ultimately, he has a lot of experience. When you look at the past hirings, obviously Jimmy Brennan and Martin Nash, former national team players, but maybe not necessarily the same experience as managers as Mora, right? So he's definitely coming in with a very much a managerial perspective as opposed to maybe one of a player.
Yeah, that's a good point. Very different profiles between York's previous managers as opposed to Mora coming in. For you, what's the vibe like within York United now? Did they feel like this change was needed? And obviously, he's just coming now, but when a new coach comes into a club, it's immediate. It's very impactful that the vibe in the club changes just from that press conference. And I don't know if you were able to be a part of his first training session, but did it feel like there was already a change within the club?
I think that the Pascals and the general manager Jorge Villalpando are very excited about this. This is a guy that they have, tabbed as a successor to Martin Nash for some time now. He is their guy. So for them to go out and get him and continue to have their influence, over the club, as he's also from Mexico. So that's now basically all the people decision makers within the club are Mexicans in terms of sporting directors, GMs, coaches. There's three Mexican players now, so that influence and identity is much more drilled in to the club right now. So they're definitely happy about it. This is a huge win, for the Pascals and Villalpando. Um, you know, as for the players, I'm not totally sure. I think it's going to take a few matches under him and a few training sessions under him to really get a grasp of what they think. But I think that the owners are certainly happy because, again, this is their guy.
So you mentioned
And
that this may have been sort of in place for a while now. You're around the club a lot. You speak with a lot of the media members. How far in advance was this really in place? Are we talking preseason, or is this more like the start of the season? This was starting to be talked about.
No, so this was I don't know the exact date, but if you do remember, Martin Nash and his whole staff were extended
Yeah.
in the offseason. It was a few days after the owners were announced. Um, After kind of the season started very slowly, they had and the Pascals had got to see in person, what does the Nash team look like? What strategies does he have? How do the players play under him? How do they react to him? Uh, which there's nothing in my opinion. I don't think there's anything too negative about that. To be honest, this came completely out of the blue. But they, they had some disagreements. That was the thing that Ricardo was saying in his first availability after making the firing of Nash official. He said, they had different philosophies on how the game should be played, and so I think he wanted someone that maybe he could work closer with, that he could also talk to and advise on the tactics, formations, all of that. So that this wasn't made like in the last 2 weeks, but it also wasn't made before the season. As right in that sweet spot after York, did start slow.
And well, you kind of mentioned there, and also in the press release, Ricardo mentioned that they didn't agree with the style of play, and that wasn't
Mhm.
the style of play that they wanted their club to be playing. They wanted a different style, as opposed to what Nashi was bringing with Benjamin Mora coming in. What style can fans expect this New York United side to be playing?
Well, we saw on canpl.ca, it was Charlie O'Connor Clark who did a piece, with more with some good quotes from more and explaining how he likes his teams to play. Uh, high pressure, very intense off the ball, it seems. But with the ball, he wants to hang on to it, and he wants to have maybe more of a structure and more control over matches that that hasn't necessarily had recently. We saw, they've played Forge 3 times this season and have conceded 3 goals in each of them. And there's not that much. Maybe it's not as much about composure. It is just like organization. So I think Mora really wants like the competitiveness in game to increase, to go up, and that's at the end of the day. I think what we're going to see a lot more of, high press, and I think it said like he likes his teams usually in maybe like a 3-4-3 or 3-5-2. I'm pretty sure it's one of those formations. So we could also see maybe some of the fullbacks like a Max Ferrari, who obviously Niko you've played with, Max Ferrari or Juan Cordova or Orlando Pateo, maybe inverting and joining the midfield and more attacking down the wings potentially.
So,
And
and Nick, not to cut you off there, but you kind of got into it. But do you think that style of play, York, York's the players of York United, that fits the profile of them to play that style, or do you think they're going to need to get different kinds of players to fit the profile? Because obviously, this team that he's inherited right now was built by Nashi to kind of fit Nashi's style of play. But now it's getting a whole new style of play. Do these players are they going to be versatile enough to suit this style, in your opinion? Since you're a York United insider.
Well, I mean, it's a fair question, but I think all the kind of signs point to like they are, because one of the things watching this team that I find York kind of limits themselves in the way they build up. They're they attack very much through the middle, and it's hard to play down the middle of the pitch. We York has guys like Prem Sumaro, Josue Martinez, very good central players, and Austin Ricci, who can drop back as a second striker. Have some interplay with Brem or Martinez or Elijah Adekugbe, who's got a couple starts recently. But profiles from the wingers they have, your Selenoviches and Patelos down the left, or Ricci moving out wide. Obviously, Mobile has an injury right now, which pretty unfortunately timed. He came off a Player of the week, and then just suffered a few back knocks, and it's reoccurring right now. So we don't really know his return date, but I think that York can play horizontally, and I think they like more switch balls, more long balls coming out of the back and playing down those wings. I think it's definitely in their arsenal and in their toolkit.
in
They just don't
conversation
do it
with
as much.
oh, sorry, Thomas. In conversation with Thomas Hewitt from Canadian Soccer Daily, you mentioned the different style of play that could potentially be coming with this new signing. Is there any players that you really think are going to benefit from that tactical change? I mean, we've seen some really good success from the York attackers so far this season when everyone's clicking, but is anyone really going to stand out with the new attacking mentality?
Well, I think we still kind of have to give it some time. I'd imagine that the 3 Mexican players do benefit in some way. Maybe they all speak Spanish. Maybe communication helps too. Like that could be a big factor on the pitch. How is Mora going to be communicating with Martinez Patello and Oswaldo Leon, who's returning from an injury right now. But I think if they do play on the wings, I think he could identify a guy like Ferrari and push him further up the pitch, because the thing with Ferrari that's always kind of baffled me a bit is that his had such a breakout offensive season in 2021 and was runner up for U21 Player of the Year in the CPL. And
You got
then
robbed.
the next, yeah, there you go,
Should
right?
have won that one.
And then the next year, I know that there's injuries. I know he had some injuries of his own, but then he starts playing fullback and at times left back. And I've always thought that you're kind of limiting a very promising attacking talent with a lot of energy, and we know that he has the stamina to drop back and make his presence known on defense. So maybe add another body into the midfield. Maybe it's Ferrari and convert him to more of a wing back, something like him and Cordova on each side, or him combining with Cordova. That seems like a pretty good duo that we've seen. So maybe those two, especially as a tandem, could really make noise down the stretch.
Interesting. What players do you feel, if any, when a new coach comes in, is now feels like, oh, this is like a clean slate? Maybe they weren't getting on with Martin Nash, or Martin Nash didn't prefer them. Is there any player in particular in that locker room that this might be he gets a fresh start, another chance to kind of prove himself?
I think there's a couple of guys who maybe haven't got starts when they easily could have. Looking at Kane Martin Peru and Marky Wojciechowski. Wojciechowski started in the first match of the season, but he had an injury, and ultimately that has kind of parlayed into very few selections and very few minutes. And obviously, you need U21 minutes in this league, and Mora might be new to that, so he might be pushed to out of Wojciechowski. Obviously, Noah Batney's done the heavy lifting for U21 minutes, but if something were to happen to him, then Marky's probably the first off the bench. But also Martin Peru, Nash really likes Martin Peru, but he was kind of been used as more of like a super sub, if anything. Although we saw at the end of 2023 some great 90-minute performances. I think back to against Vancouver in the final game of the regular season, that playoff clinching game, and he was just electric up and down the touchline. So I think those two especially could this might be their lucky break to break back into the starting 11.
What about Mora's staff? I mean, a new coach comes in. Sometimes he comes with his own staff members that he's worked with in the past. You got Morrow there as the assistant. Is it fair to say that the Pascal brothers have full confidence in Morrow and also want him to be a part of the project moving forward?
We'll have to see what they do in the off season. I think what they do with the full off season is going to be very interesting. But as of right now, we know that Maro's staying on board as the assistant coach, and Camilo's staying on board. Camilo Benzi is staying on board as the goalkeeping coach. Obviously, they had those multi-year extensions in the off season, so I think as of right now, the plan is to stick with them. There's not. I don't think there's gonna be any change in like the backroom staff, like the fitness staff, anything like that. I'm pretty sure they're gonna have the same strength and conditioning coach and everything like that.
Nick, any more York
No, you
questions
kind of
at this
asked my
time?
question there, Nico, so I'm good.
Damn, jump to it. Thomas, I kind of want to get into just quickly a little bit about you. I mean, talk about how you kind of got on this journey of being not only a York United insider reporter, but also, I mean, just a Canada soccer reporter. I mean, you're now a well-known name in the media space. Where the hell did you come from?
Well, it started in couple years ago, so in 2022, and I'd just gotten kind of into soccer like the past 2 summers. So I had stumbled across York United, and as a smaller club in CFC. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. So 2022 schedule comes out, tickets go on sale, and then I go for one game, and immediately it's just like I'm hooked immediately. And I know
Who'd
Niko,
you
I
go?
know
Who'd you go with? Who'd you go with? Who'd you go to the game with? No, it's not like you drove over.
I I no no I went with my dad, but
Okay.
I was with the Northern Quarter, them,
Yeah.
Nice.
obviously, some great guys. So that was kind of the start, and then from there, I've been doing sports writing for a while. It's always been kind of a dream of mine. So I had like a Substack and everything, and from that game on, I decided I'm gonna start writing about York because this is, it doesn't seem like they have a lot of coverage. Maybe this is you know, get a foot in the door here that can lead to anything really. So I did, and then next year comes around, um, the media manager, communications manager at York, and so he sent me the link to apply for media accreditation before the 2023 season. So I went for it. Obviously anything could have happened. He could have easily said no if there's heavy demand, but he approved it, and from then it's just been about you know emailing Canada soccer people to get on their mailing list, get credentials to those games. Last night I was at the Canada versus Mexico match in Toronto, which was a lot of fun. And yeah, it's really happened very fast in the span of 18 months, but it's been crazy. But I've loved all of it.
And how old are you? Or what grade are you in?
15.
15. What grade
I'm
is that? Is that
15
grade 9?
at the end of grade 9. Yeah.
At the end of grade 9. I mean, you got a full-time job. You got to be the only ninth grader that's already. You should be telling. Do you take any journalism classes? Do you just basically school your teacher? It's like, hey, sir, give me that pencil. I'm teaching the class today. I mean, you have more experience than probably some of your journalism teachers. This is
I
insane.
mean, we don't even really have a journalism class. The closest thing that would come to that is English, but
I
that's,
was gonna say it's still
pretty
grade
different.
9. You haven't specialized. You don't have
Yeah, there's
specialized
no
classes yet.
specialized. It's just straight up the classes. Your English is math, science, all that.
You're still learning how to type in grade 9, and you got newspapers. Awesome. Good for you, Thomas.
That's
Nick,
awesome, Thomas.
Thank
anything
you.
from you?
No, I just want to say I really appreciate you jumping on with us today, man. Yeah, I loved your insight, and we'll definitely get you back on soon.
That sounds great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Thomas. Thomas Hewitt from Walking the Red and Canadian Soccer Daily. Appreciate you jumping on, man.